Welcome to the Listen and Sleep channel. Allow yourself to relax. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let your breathing become slower, deeper. Today we will embark on a journey through time and space to the very origins of human wisdom, to the place where, among the rustling of sacred leaves, words were born that can change the understanding of who you truly are. Everything begins with silence, the barely perceptible whisper of wind in the crowns of ancient trees, the soft touch of morning light on dew-covered earth. In this peace, where there is no need to hurry, where time flows by its own laws, space appears for the most important question: who am I? What is reality? And is it possible to find something that does not disappear, does not change, does not cause suffering? Imagine India in times when the world was different, when rivers flowed clearer, forests grew thicker, and the sky seemed closer to earth. This was a time when people lived without haste, when the change of seasons determined the rhythm of life more than any human plans. In those days, many thousands of years ago, in the shade of huge banyans and peepal trees, those who were drawn to the main mystery of existence gathered. They were not philosophers in the modern sense. They were seekers, people who felt that behind the visible world something greater, more true, was hidden. These sages, who were called rishis, did not build temples of stone. Their temple was nature itself. Their altar was their own heart, and their prayer was careful observation of what happens inside and around. In forest refuges, which were called ashrams, a special atmosphere reigned. Morning began before sunrise, when the air was still cool and filled with the aromas of night flowers. In this pre-dawn silence, when even the birds were still quiet, the sages sat under trees and immersed themselves in contemplation. They did not think about everyday worries. Their minds turned to eternal questions. Where does consciousness come from? What remains unchanged when everything around changes? Is there something that connects me with every leaf, every star, every breath of life? These questions were not idle curiosity. They were born from a deep need to understand the nature of suffering and find what could bring genuine peace. The sages saw how people suffered from losses, how they clung to what would inevitably disappear, how they sought happiness where it could not be, and they felt that something else must exist, something that is not subject to destruction, that does not depend on external circumstances. That is the source of true tranquility. Day after day, year after year, they sat in meditation. They observed their thoughts as one observes clouds floating across the sky. They studied their feelings as one studies the flow of a river. They explored the deepest layers of their being, descending to where there are no names, no forms, no division into I and not I. And in this depth, they began to find answers, not in the form of concepts or theories, but in the form of direct experience, direct knowledge. Gradually, confidence was born in their hearts. What they were looking for was not somewhere far away. It was right here, closer than the closest. It was their own essence, only hidden under layers of habitual ideas about themselves. As the sun is hidden by clouds but does not disappear anywhere, so their true nature was always in place, simply forgotten, not recognized. In the hours when the sun declined toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, teachers gathered students. They sat in a circle, and in the soft light of sunset, words sounded that were passed from mouth to mouth, from heart to heart. These were not lectures or sermons. This was living communication, where each student's question was met with the patient, loving answer of the teacher. Students came by different paths. Some sought relief from suffering. Others strived to understand the meaning of life. Still others simply felt that something greater existed than everyday bustle. Teachers accepted everyone, but gave each person exactly what they could perceive. One needed simple analogies. Another suited complex philosophical reasoning. A third was helped by silent presence, which spoke more than any words. Knowledge was transmitted not only by words. It lived in the atmosphere of these places, in the rhythm of the day, which began with silence and ended with silence. It lived in how teachers related to every being, how they found the sacred in the most ordinary things. When a student washed dishes, the teacher might say, "Look how water washes dirt from this bowl." In in the same way, knowledge washes ignorance from the heart. When someone lit a fire, it sounded, "See how one spark can light many candles, so the awakening of one person can awaken many." Gradually, in these forest refuges, an understanding was formed that would later be called Vedanta. This word means the end of the Vedas, or the completion of the Vedas. The Vedas were sacred hymns that praised gods and described rituals. But the sages went beyond external ceremonies. They found what all rituals lead to, what is hidden behind all names of gods, what is the source of all prayers. This discovery was not the result of logical constructions. It was born in moments of deepest silence, when the mind became like the smooth surface of a lake on a windless day. In such moments, the boundary between the knower and the known disappeared. The meditator suddenly understood that what he was looking for and the one who was looking were always the same. It was like waking from a dream in which you forgot who you are. The sun set. Stars lit up one by one. In the ashrams, small lamps were lit, filling the air with soft golden light and the aroma of clarified butter. In this atmosphere of peace and reverence, texts were born that would become the foundation of one of humanity's greatest spiritual traditions. Words capable of pointing the way to that understanding which liberates from all fears, from all doubts, from all searching. These ancient sages laid the foundation for understanding that every person carries within the greatest mystery. That truth does not need proof, because it is what we are. That the search for God, the search for truth, the search for happiness always leads to one discovery. What we sought was never separated from us. In the following chapters, we will immerse ourselves deeper into this wisdom. We will hear voices that have reached us through thousands of years. We will touch those truths that are capable of changing the understanding of the very nature of reality. For now, allow yourself simply to be here, in this silence, where all genuine knowledge begins. Imagine a time when the world was young, a time when rivers carried clean water and the air was filled with aromas of wild flowers and sacred trees. In those days, in the depths of the forests of ancient India, words were born that changed the understanding of what it means to be human. These words were not the result of philosophical discussions or intellectual constructions. They came from the depth of silence, from that stillness where the ordinary mind becomes quiet and something greater manifests. The texts that appeared in that era were called the Upanishads. This word itself carries deep meaning. Upa means close, ni means down, shad means to sit. Upanishad is that knowledge which was transmitted when the student sat close to the teacher, when there was nothing superfluous between them, when words flowed from heart to heart without distortions. These conversations did not happen in crowded gatherings. They occurred in intimate settings where every word was weighed, where every pause had meaning. The teacher could observe the student for months before entrusting him with the most intimate truths. Because these truths were not information for the mind. They were indications of what can only be experienced, only realized directly. In the morning, when the first rays of sun broke through the foliage, teacher and student could sit in silence for hours. This was not a waste of time. In this silence, the mind calmed down, thoughts slowed, and the possibility appeared to hear what is usually drowned out by internal chatter. Sometimes, in such moments, the teacher would say only a few words, but these words fell into the prepared soil of the heart and sprouted with understanding that changed the whole life. The Upanishads differed from earlier Vedic texts. The Vedas were hymns to gods, descriptions of rituals, rules for priests. They addressed the external side of religion. What can be done to appease higher powers, receive their blessing, ensure prosperity? The Upanishads turned attention inward. They said, everything you seek in the external world, everything you try to get from gods, already exists within you. You have simply forgotten about it. This turn from external to internal was revolutionary. Instead of complex rituals requiring many sacrifices and precise observance of rules, the Upanishads offered the simplest and most difficult thing: to know yourself. Not that self which you consider yourself, not that image which the mind created, but the one who exists before all images, who remains unchanged in all changes of life. In quiet evening hours, when the day's heat subsided and cool wind brought aromas of jasmine and sandalwood, the sages, rishis, immersed themselves in deep states of consciousness. They did not use any external means. Their only tool was attentiveness, the ability to observe the movements of their own mind without identifying with them. In these states, they received knowledge not through reflection, but through direct experience of truth. What they experienced in these moments was difficult to convey in words. How to describe the taste of honey to one who has never tasted it? How to explain the beauty of sunset to a person born blind? The Upanishads are full of attempts to find words for what is beyond words. They use metaphors, analogies, negations. They say, not this, pointing to truth through discarding everything false. One of the central ideas of the Upanishads is that reality is not as it seems. What we take to be a world of separate things and beings is actually a manifestation of unified consciousness. As waves on the surface of the ocean seem separate, but consist of the same water, so all the diversity of the world is the movement of one and the same foundation of being. This foundation received the name Brahman, not a god in the ordinary sense, not a personality that rules the universe, but the very fabric of reality from which everything existing is woven. Brahman is not something that can be seen or touched, because it is vision itself, touch itself. It is not an object of knowledge, but that subject which knows, not something that can be found, but the one who seeks. In the Upanishads, there is a beautiful story about how a sage explained to his student the nature of Brahman. He took a piece of salt and threw it into water. The next day, he asked the student to find the salt. Of course, the salt had dissolved and became invisible. But when the student tasted the water, it was salty. "You see," said the teacher, "salt is present everywhere, although you do not see it. In the same way, Brahman is present in everything, although it remains invisible to the ordinary gaze." Gradually, through such simple examples, through patient explanations, through long hours of silent contemplation, a new understanding formed in the minds of students. The world is not a collection of separate things randomly assembled together. The world is a unified reality playing in infinite variety of forms. And a person is not a stranger in this world. He is part of this play, a wave on the surface of the infinite ocean of being. The Upanishads did not create a new religion. They revealed the inner meaning of the religion that already existed. They showed that behind all rituals, behind all prayers, behind all names of gods, one truth is hidden. You are not separated from that which you worship. You are not a small being praying to a huge God. You are part of the same consciousness that manifests as this God, as this world, as all beings. This idea was so radical that it took centuries for it to be properly understood. Many continued to think that spiritual life is a relationship between man and God, between lower and higher. The Upanishads asserted, there is neither lower nor higher. There is only one consciousness playing the role of many. There is only one truth wearing masks of multitude. Night descended on the forest ashrams. The sounds of day subsided. In this silence, broken only by the singing of crickets and the rustling of leaves, the sages recorded what was revealed to them in moments of deepest peace. They wrote not to create sacred literature. They wrote to leave indications for those who would come after them, for those who would also seek truth about their nature. The Upanishads became a bridge between external religion and inner understanding. They took ancient Vedic images and filled them with new meaning. The sacrificial fire became a symbol of that flame of consciousness which burns in everyone's heart. The sacred syllable Om became the sound of reality itself, the vibration from which all worlds are born. The journey to sacred places became a journey within oneself, to that place where truth dwells. These texts did not require blind faith. They invited investigation, verification, direct experience. Do not accept our words on faith, they said. Investigate yourself. Immerse yourself in the silence of your own heart and see what is there. The knowledge you receive in this way will belong to you forever. So in the silence of ancient forests, wisdom was born that would reach our days. Wisdom that will never become outdated because it speaks of what is not subject to time. About that truth which existed before the birth of worlds and will remain after their disappearance. About what you truly are when you remove all masks, all roles, all ideas about yourself. In the depth of the human heart lives a great mystery. a mystery that is not hidden from us, but hidden by us from ourselves. We are so accustomed to seeking meaning and happiness in what surrounds us that we forget to look where they are originally located. We are so absorbed in the game of separateness that we forget about the unity that makes this game possible. The ancient sages, whose voices reach us through the Upanishads, spoke of a reality that is beyond all names and forms. They called it Brahman. This word is difficult to translate because it points to something that has no analogues in ordinary experience. It is not a god, not energy, not substance. It is being itself, consciousness itself, the very foundation of everything that can be or not be. Imagine a boundless ocean without shores, without bottom, without surface. An ocean that consists not of water, but of pure awareness. In this ocean there are no waves, but it is capable of taking the form of any wave. There are no objects, but it can become any object. There are no beings, but it can manifest as any being. This is Brahman, the deepest reality that lies at the foundation of the entire manifested world. But how to speak of what is beyond words? How to describe what has no qualities, but is the source of all qualities? The sages found a special way. They spoke of Brahman through negation. Neti, neti, they repeated. Not this, not this, not what you see, not what you think, not what you feel, and not even what you can imagine as the most sublime and beautiful. This method of negation was not an attempt to belittle the world or declare it an illusion. It was a way to free the mind from the habit of clinging to forms and point to what remains when all forms disappear. As a sculptor removes excess stone to reveal a statue, so negation removes everything superfluous to reveal the true nature of reality. In quiet morning hours, when the air was still cool and filled with aromas of awakening nature, the sages sat in meditation and directed attention to the source of attention itself. What remains when there is not a single thought? What is present in deep sleep when both body and mind disappear? What was before birth, and what will remain after death? These questions did not require intellectual analysis. They were invitations to direct experience of what is not born and does not die. Brahman, according to the Upanishads, possesses three basic characteristics. Although the word possesses itself is not suitable here, because Brahman does not have anything. It itself is everything. These characteristics are Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means being, existence without limitations. Chit means consciousness, awareness without object. Ananda means bliss, fullness without need for anything else. Sat is not existence in opposition to non-existence. It is the very foundation of what makes possible both existence and non-existence. Chit is not consciousness of something specific, but the very capacity of awareness, thanks to which anything can be realized. Ananda is not happiness in opposition to unhappiness, but the very fullness of being that does not depend on any conditions. These three aspects are not parts of Brahman. They are different ways of pointing to one and the same indivisible reality. As water remains water, whether it is liquid, steam, or ice, so Brahman remains itself, whether it manifests as being consciousness or bliss. In hot afternoon hours, when the sun stood high and even birds hid in shade, a special silence reigned in the ashrams. This was the time for the deepest immersion, when the external world seemed to dissolve in the haze, and only pure presence remained. In these moments, the distinction between the meditator and the object of meditation disappeared. Only meditation itself remained, only awareness itself, only Brahma itself. Students often asked, if Brahman is everywhere, why do we not see it? If it is our true nature, why do we not feel it? Teachers answered with parables and analogies. They spoke of a person who searches for his necklace, forgetting that it is on his neck, of one who asks the way home standing on the threshold of his own house, of a fish that dies of thirst in the ocean. The reason we do not recognize our true nature is not that it is hidden somewhere. The reason is that we are too close to it. Brahman is not an object that can be seen because it is vision itself, not something that can be known because it is knowledge itself, not something that can be found because it is the search itself. The sages used the metaphor of space to help understand the nature of Brahman. Space is present everywhere, but it cannot be touched. It contains all things, but itself is not a thing. It has no boundaries, but makes all boundaries possible. So Brahman is present in everything, as space is present in all objects, but at the same time remains untouched by what happens in it. Another popular analogy is clay and pots. From one clay, many pots of different shapes and sizes can be made. Each pot has its name, its purpose, its history, but in essence, they all remain clay. So all forms in the world, all beings, all phenomena in essence, are Brahman, although externally they seem completely different. This truth was not just a philosophical idea. It was a living experience that completely changed the attitude to life. When a person realized his true nature, fear of death disappeared because it became clear. What he truly is never was born and never will die. The feeling of loneliness dissolved because in everything he recognized himself. The thirst for possession faded because he understood. He already is everything that can be. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of golden purple. In this soft light, teachers transmitted the most intimate instructions. They spoke quietly, almost in whispers, because the truth about Brahman does not tolerate loud words. It opens only in silence, only in that state of mind which is free from the desire to get something or avoid something. Brahman is closer to you than your breath, they said. It is more intimate than your most intimate thoughts. It is not in temples, not in sacred places, not in special states of consciousness. It is right here, right now, as this very here and this very now. You cannot approach it because you already are it. You cannot find it because you never lost it. Night brought special depth to these conversations. In the light of oil lamps, under the dome of the starry sky, wisdom was transmitted that would change humanity's understanding of itself. Brahman is not a god who needs to be worshipped, not a force that needs to be appeased, not a goal to which one must strive. Brahman is that very striving, that very worship, that very experience of God. In these words, there was neither arrogance nor denial of the divine. On the contrary, in them was the greatest reverence for the mystery of existence. But this reverence was addressed not to something external, but to the very foundation of the one who reveres, to that miracle that consciousness exists at all, to that incredible fact that reality can be aware of itself. So, in the silence of ancient forests, an understanding was born that would become the heart of Vedanta, understanding that the sought and the seeker, the known and the knower, the beloved and the lover are ultimately one, that all spiritual life is a journey from the illusion of separation to the realization of unity, from the feeling of being a separate wave to understanding that you are the ocean itself. Within every person lives a treasure more precious than all the riches of the world. This treasure does not need to be sought in distant lands or created by long efforts. It is already here, closer than the closest, more intimate than the most intimate. The ancient sages called it Atman, the true I, which is hidden behind all masks, all roles, all ideas about oneself. The word Atman comes from a root meaning breath or soul. But this is not the soul in the sense it is usually understood, not some subtle essence that lives inside the body and leaves it after death. Atman is the very foundation of what makes any experience, any feeling, any awareness possible. Imagine a dream. In your dream, different characters can appear. People, animals, fantastic beings. Each of them seems separate, has their own character, their own story. But when you wake up, it becomes clear. They were all manifestations of your own consciousness. In exactly the same way, all the roles you play in life, son or daughter, student or teacher, friend or enemy, are roles of one and the same Atman, one and the same pure consciousness. In pre-dawn hours, when the world was still immersed in silence and the air was filled with the freshness of night coolness, the sages explored the nature of this inner I. They asked themselves simple but revolutionary questions. Who is the one who thinks thoughts? Who is the one who feels emotions? Who is the one who is aware of both thoughts and emotions and remains unchanged when they come and go? This search was not an intellectual exercise. It was a living investigation that required the greatest honesty before oneself. It is easy to say, I think, or I feel. But who is this I? If you identify yourself with your thoughts, then who is the one who observes the thoughts? If you consider yourself your emotions, then who is the one who remains present when emotions change? Gradually, layer by layer, all false identifications were discarded. I am not my body, the seeker understood, because I can observe my body. I am not my thoughts, because I can see how thoughts come and go, and I remain. I am not my feelings, because feelings change, and what is aware of them remains unchanged. This process of self-investigation could take years, not because the truth was complex, but because the mind is accustomed to identifying with what it is not. Like a person who wears a mask for so long that he forgets his real face, so consciousness forgets its true nature, identifying with temporary manifestations. In hot daytime hours, when the sun stood at its zenith and shadows became short and clear, a special concentration reigned in the ashrams. This was the time for the most intent self-observation. Students sat in meditation and patiently explored each layer of their existence. First, they turned attention to the body. They felt breathing, heartbeat, various sensations, and they noticed there is one who feels all this. The body changes from childhood to old age, but the one who is aware of it remains the same. Therefore, Atman is not the body. Then they immersed themselves in the exploration of the mind. They observed thoughts as they arise and disappear. They noticed emotions, how they color perception, and then dissolve. And again they discovered there is one who observes all movements of the mind. The mind can be calm or agitated, clear or clouded, but the observer remains untouched. Therefore, Atman is not the mind. The most subtle investigators went even deeper. They studied the very feeling of I am, which is always present, regardless of what we think or feel. And even this feeling of I am turned out to be an object of observation for something even more fundamental. Who am I? Became not just a question, but a living state of investigation. Not an attempt to find an answer, but a way of dissolving all false answers. Because Atman cannot be found as an object. It itself is the subject of all searching. Teachers used beautiful analogies to help students understand this truth. They spoke of a movie and a screen. Any movies can be shown on the screen. Dramas, comedies, action films. The screen remains untouched by the content of the films. It does not become sad from tragedy or cheerful from comedy. So, Atman remains unchanged, whatever experiences pass through consciousness. Another popular metaphor is a mirror and reflections. Beautiful and ugly objects can be reflected in a mirror, but the mirror itself remains pure. It does not become beautiful or ugly depending on what is reflected in it. So Atman reflects all experience in itself, remaining at the same time unstained. But perhaps the deepest analogy is space. Space contains all objects, but does not become an object. Any events can happen in it, but it remains unchanged. It has no form, but makes all forms possible. So Atman has no qualities, but is the foundation for all experiences of qualities. In evening hours, when the day's heat subsided and cool wind brought aromas of flowering trees, teachers revealed the most intimate secret. Atman and Brahman are not two different principles. This is one and the same reality considered from different points of view. Brahman is absolute reality considered cosmically. Atman is the same reality discovered in the depth of individual consciousness. As one and the same gold can be made in the form of a ring, bracelet, or necklace, but remains gold, so one consciousness manifests as individual awareness and as the cosmic foundation of everything existing. The realization of this unity is the goal of all spiritual searching. When a person realized his true nature as Atman, his life changed radically. Fear of death disappeared because it became clear what he truly is exists outside birth and death. The feeling of loneliness dissolved because he discovered himself in all beings. The thirst for possession faded because he understood. How can one desire what one already is? This did not mean that life became colorless or emotionless. On the contrary, it was filled with new depth and beauty. But now joy and sadness, success and failure were perceived as waves on the surface of the infinite ocean of consciousness. They came and went, but the ocean itself remained undisturbed. The Jivan Mukta does not consider himself special or chosen. He knows what he has realized exists in every person. The difference is only that he stopped seeking it outside and discovered it inside. As a person who found his lost glasses does not consider himself great, so the awakened one does not feel superiority over others. In the evening, when the sun sets and the world prepares for rest, the Jivan Mukta can sit in the garden and observe the play of light and shadow on leaves. For him, this is not just a beautiful sight, but a living manifestation of the same consciousness which he is. Every leaf, every ray of light, every shadow is part of one infinite dance of being. Death does not frighten him because he knows what he truly is never was born and never will die. The body can age and disappear, but the consciousness that was aware through this body is eternal. As an actor does not die when the performance ends, so the true I is not affected by the death of the body. But this does not make him indifferent to life. On the contrary, knowing about the transience of all forms, he values every moment, every meeting, every experience as a precious gift. He lives a full life, but without attachment to its results. Those around may not understand his behavior. Why does he not strive for wealth if money does not bring him suffering? Why does he not avoid difficulties if they do not cause him pain? Why is he equally calm in praise and blame, in success and failure? The answer is simple. He sees in everything manifestations of one and the same consciousness. Wealth and poverty, praise and blame, success and failure are waves on the surface of the ocean of his own being. They come and go, but the ocean remains unchanged. The Jivan Mukta does not deny the world and does not run from it. He participates in life fully, but as an actor participates in a performance, knowing that it is a play, but playing with all his heart. He can be a family man, or a hermit, a king, or a beggar. The external role does not matter. Only the inner understanding of one's true nature is important. At night, lying in bed, he does not plan tomorrow with anxiety and does not worry about the past with regret. He simply abides in the present moment, in pure awareness of what is, and he falls asleep with the same ease with which a river flows into the sea, knowing that in the morning he will again play the role of a separate wave. The state of Jivanmukta is not exclusive or unattainable. It is the natural state of every person, temporarily hidden by ignorance about one's own nature. And awakening to this state can happen at any moment, with any person ready to let go of all ideas about who he is and see who he truly is. In this vision, there is neither praya nor humility. There is only simple recognition of truth, which was always obvious, but somehow was not noticed. Like a person who searched for his glasses for a long time suddenly discovers that they were on his nose all along, and laughs at his own blindness. There are phrases capable of changing the understanding of all reality, words that sound simple, but carry in them the power of the greatest revelations. In the ancient texts of the Upanishads, there are 4 such phrases. They are called mahavakyas, great sayings, great truths. Each of them is like a key capable of opening the door to understanding who you truly are. These sayings were not the result of philosophical reflections. They were born in moments of deepest insight, when the boundary between the knower and the known dissolved, and only pure knowledge remained, knowledge of oneself. In those instants, when the mind became completely quiet, like the surface of a lake on a windless day, in this silence, words sounded capable of awakening one who is ready to hear them. The first great saying sounds, Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is Brahman. These words do not describe consciousness as one of the properties of absolute reality. They assert consciousness is reality itself, not that consciousness which is aware of objects, but that which makes any awareness possible, pure awareness, without content, without boundaries, without center. In early morning hours, when the world was still asleep and the sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, this understanding came to the sages with special clarity. In these moments, when the mind had not yet begun its daily activity, when thoughts were rare and quiet, it became obvious. That which is aware of silence is itself silent. That which knows peace is itself in perfect peace. The consciousness spoken of by the sages is not like the ordinary understanding of this word, we are accustomed to thinking of consciousness as something that is in the head, that belongs to the brain, that is the result of complex neural processes. But the Upanishads pointed to something more fundamental: consciousness as the very foundation of being, that thanks to which the brain, the head, and the whole world can exist. The second great saying is Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Not the small ego that worries about everyday problems, not the personality with its history, habits, preferences, but that very I which remains unchanged through all changes of life, that I which was the same in childhood and now, that I which is present both in the waking state and in sleep, and in deep sleep without dreams. Realization of this truth came not through logical reasoning, but through direct experience. In moments of deep meditation, when all thoughts subsided and only pure presence remained, it became clear: this presence does not belong to anyone. It itself is what we are in our very essence. Hot daytime hours were the time of the most intense investigation of this truth. Students sat in the shade of large trees and patiently separated what they are not from what they truly are. I am not this body because I can observe it. I am not these thoughts because I can see them. I am not these feelings because they come and go, and I remain. Gradually, through this process of self-investigation, what cannot be discarded was discovered, because it is the very foundation of all discarding, that pure I which has no qualities but makes experiencing all qualities possible, that boundless consciousness which has no form but in which all forms appear and disappear. The third great saying is Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. These words are addressed directly to you, to everyone who hears them. They say, what you seek in the farthest corners of the universe, what you worship in temples, what you dream of as supreme happiness, all this you yourself are. You do not need to become something else. You only need to recognize what you already are. That in this phrase points to Brahman, to absolute reality, to what is the source and foundation of everything existing. Thou is not your personality, not your role in society, not your history, it is your deepest essence, that consciousness which is reading these words now, which understands their meaning, which can agree with them or doubt them. Evening hours were especially suitable for contemplating this truth. When the sun set and the world was enveloped in soft twilight, when the sounds of day subsided and silence came. In this atmosphere of peace, it became easier to see what is usually hidden by the bustle of everyday life. Teachers often used the analogy of the 10th man to explain the meaning of this saying. 10 friends were crossing a river. When they reached the other shore, one of them decided to count whether everyone was safe. He counted only 9 people and raised the alarm. One has drowned. The others also began to count and also got the number 9. Everyone fell into despair until a sage explained to them, each counts the others but forgets to count himself. The 10th person is you yourself. So it is in spiritual searching. We seek God everywhere except the only place where He truly is, in our own essence. We strive for truth, happiness, love, not noticing that this very striving comes from a source that already contains everything sought. The 4th great saying is Ayam Atma Brahma. This Atman is Brahman. Here the circle closes. Individual consciousness and cosmic reality turn out to be one and the same, not similar to each other, not connected to each other, but literally identical. As the space in a pot and the space around the pot are one and the same space, only conditionally separated by the walls of the pot. This truth was not just a philosophical concept. It became a living experience for those who immersed themselves deeply enough in self-investigation. In moments of highest insight, the sense of being a separate being disappeared. Not in the sense that the person lost consciousness, but in the sense that consciousness expanded to infinity. Imagine a drop of water that thinks of itself as a separate entity. It fears drying up, strives to become larger, envies other drops. But when it falls into the ocean, all these problems are instantly solved. Not because the drop disappears, but because it discovers. It never was separate. It always was part of the ocean, simply, temporarily, forgot about it. In night hours, when the world was immersed in deep peace, these 4 great truths were repeated as mantras, as reminders of what lies beyond all changes. They did not require faith or intellectual understanding. They were indications of what could be directly experienced in the silence of one's own heart. Consciousness is Brahman. Not consciousness of something, but pure consciousness itself, in which all experiences appear and disappear. I am Brahman, not the ego, but that boundless, which is the foundation of all experience. Thou art that, a direct indication that the sought and the seeker are one. This Atman is Brahman, the final recognition that the individual and the universal are different names of one reality. The sages understood these truths cannot be proved by logic. They cannot be accepted on faith. They can only be experienced. Therefore, they created conditions in which such experience became possible. They taught silence because in silence it is easier to hear what always sounds. They taught self-investigation because through investigation one can discard everything false and discover the true. They also understood that this knowledge cannot be given to someone from outside. It can only be awakened in one who already carries it within. As you cannot light a candle from another candle if it has no wick, so you cannot transmit this understanding to one who is not ready to receive it. The great sayings of the Upanishads have not become outdated over thousands of years. They remain as fresh and relevant as on the day they were first uttered, because they speak not of what can change, but of what is the foundation of all changes, not of what needs to be achieved, but of what already is, not of whom one needs to become, but of whom we are now and always. In the silence of your heart, these words sound right now, not as information for the mind, but as recognition of what was never truly forgotten, as a return home after a long journey to oneself. The world is full of mysteries and wonders, but perhaps the biggest mystery is why we do not see what is right in front of us. Why does unified consciousness seem divided into many separate beings? Why is infinite happiness sought in finite things? Why does what was never born fear death? The ancient sages found the answer to these riddles in understanding what they called Maya. Maya is often translated as illusion, but this word can be misleading. Maya does not mean that the world is unreal in the sense that it does not exist at all. It means that the world is not as it seems, that behind visible diversity, unity is hidden, that behind constant changes stands the unchanging, that behind the play of forms lies formless consciousness. Imagine a magician at a fair. He shows you an empty hat and then pulls out a white dove. You know this is a trick, but you cannot understand how he does it. The dove appeared real, alive, but the way of its appearance is not as it seems. In the same way, the world seems to consist of many separate things and beings, but the way of its existence is not as it appears to ordinary perception. In morning hours, when fog spreads over the river, you can observe a beautiful analogy of Maya. In the fog, familiar objects take strange forms. A tree can seem like a person, a post like a fence, a dog like a wolf. But when the sun rises higher and the fog dissipates, it becomes clear. The objects were the same as they always were. Only perception changed. In the same way, Maya is not something that needs to be destroyed or gotten rid of. It is a way of perception that can be changed. When perception changes, the world remains the same, but understanding of its nature becomes completely different. The sages used many analogies to explain the nature of Maya. One of the most popular is the story of the rope and the snake. In twilight, a person sees a snake on the road and is frightened. The heart begins to beat faster. The body is covered with sweat. The desire to run arises. But when someone brings a lantern, it becomes clear. There was no snake. It was an ordinary rope. What is interesting is that the fear was real. The sweat was real. The desire to run was real. But the cause of all these experiences turned out to be illusory. There was no snake that could cause harm. There was only a rope, completely harmless. So it is with our suffering. It seems real, and in some sense, it really is real. But its cause is illusory. We suffer from the sense of separateness, but there is actually no separateness. We fear losing what we love, but nothing can be lost, because at a deep level, everything is one. We seek happiness in objects, but happiness is our own nature. In hot midday hours, when the sun stands high and creates mirages on the road, you can see another beautiful metaphor of Maya. A mirage looks like real water. A thirsty traveler runs toward it, but the closer he approaches, the farther the mirage recedes. Because there was never any water there, it is a play of light and air. So it is with all our searches for happiness in the external world. We think, when I get this job, I will be happy. When I meet this person, I will find peace. When I buy this house, I will feel safe. But when we get what we want, happiness again eludes us, and we rush to the next mirage. This does not mean that we need to give up all desires or become indifferent to life. It means understanding that happiness is not in objects. Objects can be an occasion for happiness, but not its source. The source of happiness is in consciousness itself, which experiences any experience. Maya also explains why one and the same situation can be perceived completely differently by different people. Rain can gladden a peasant and upset one who planned a picnic. The same word can seem like a compliment or an insult depending on who hears it. Reality is one, but perception of it can be infinitely diverse. Evening twilight was especially suitable for reflections on the nature of Maya. In this intermediate light, when the day has not yet ended, but night is already beginning, when the forms of objects become indefinite, it is easier to understand that our perception of the world is always subjective, always colored by the state of consciousness. Teachers often told the parable of the elephant and the blind. Several blind people were feeling an elephant and trying to understand what it was. One touched the trunk and said, "This is a snake." Another touched the leg. "This is a post." A third touched the side. "This is a wall." A fourth touched the tail. "This is a rope." Each was right within the framework of his limited perception, but no one saw the elephant as a whole. In the same way, we, perceiving reality through the prism of limited mind, see only fragments of the whole. One sees the world as a field of struggle, another as a source of pleasures, a third as a valley of tears, a fourth as divine play. All these perceptions are true in some way, but none exhausts the truth completely. Maya is not an enemy that needs to be defeated. It is the creative force that makes the very existence of the world possible. Without Maya, there would be only the unified, unchanging, motionless consciousness. Maya allows this consciousness to play an infinite variety of roles, to experience itself as many beings, to enjoy its own creativity. In night hours, when the world was immersed in silence, the sages contemplated Maya not as a problem that needs to be solved, but as a mystery that needs to be understood. They saw in it not an obstacle on the path to truth, but the very play of truth with itself. As an actor on stage fully enters the role, but never forgets who he truly is, so consciousness plays the role of separate beings while remaining unified. Understanding, Maya liberates from condemnation of the world. The world is not bad and not good. It is simply not as it seems. It is not real and not unreal. It is real as a play of consciousness, but unreal as a collection of independently existing objects. It does not need to be different. It is already perfect, exactly as it is, because it is a manifestation of perfect consciousness. When a person begins to see Maya as it is, life does not become less interesting. On the contrary, it acquires new depth and beauty. As a viewer in a theater can simultaneously empathize with the heroes of the play and remember that it is only a play, so one who has understood the nature of Maya can fully participate in life without forgetting its playful character. This understanding brings the greatest freedom. Freedom from fear, because there is nothing to lose. Freedom from greed, because there is nothing to acquire. Freedom from anger, because there is nothing to be angry at. Everything that happens is the dance of one and the same consciousness with itself. A game of forgetting and recognition, of separation and meeting, of loss and finding. Maya teaches us not seriousness, but playfulness, not heaviness, but lightness, not attachment, but spontaneity. It shows that life is not a problem that needs to be solved, but a mystery to be enjoyed. Not a lesson that needs to be learned, but a dance in which to participate. In this dance, there are no wrong movements. Every step, every turn, every pause is perfect because it is an expression of one and the same infinite creativity. And you are not a spectator of this dance. You are the dance itself that has taken the form of a dancer. There are moments in our life when all boundaries dissolve, when the sense of I and world disappears, and only pure being remains. This can happen in deep meditation, in moments of great beauty, in the instant of falling in love, or in an hour of deep sorrow. In these moments, we get a taste of that state which is our true nature. The ancient sages studied these states of consciousness as a map of inner journey. They discovered that different levels of awareness exist, and each reveals something important about the nature of the one who is aware. As a river flows from mountain sources through plains to the sea, so consciousness moves through different states to its source. The first state is ordinary waking, when we perceive the world through the sense organs. We see forms, hear sounds, feel touches. It seems that we are inside the body and looking at the external world. The sages called this state Jagrat, the waking state. In this state, we feel ourselves as actors in our life. We make decisions, build plans, rejoice in successes, experience failures. The world seems to consist of many separate things and beings with which we interact. This is the most familiar state in which most of our life passes. But even in the waking state, an attentive observer can notice something amazing. All experiences come and go, but what is aware of them remains unchanged. Thoughts change, feelings change, even sensations of the body change, but the very capacity of awareness remains the same. The second state is sleep with dreams. Here the external world disappears, but the internal world becomes even more vivid and diverse. In a dream, we can fly, meet the deceased, find ourselves in incredible places, experience unthinkable adventures. The sages called this state Svapna, the world of dreams. What is interesting is that in a dream, we usually do not doubt the reality of what is happening. A dream seems as convincing as waking. We rejoice and suffer in a dream as sincerely as when awake. And only upon waking do we understand all this was only a dream. This observation led the sages to a deep question. If a dream can seem as real as waking, then could it be that waking is also a kind of dream? More stable, more consistent, but ultimately just as subjective? In quiet evening hours, When consciousness prepared for the transition to sleep, the sages observed this process especially attentively. They noticed how gradually the connection with the external world weakens, how thoughts become more and more bizarre, how reality begins to obey other laws. And they discovered an amazing thing. The one who is aware of waking and the one who is aware of dreams is one and the same witness. The consciousness that sees dreams is the same that perceives daytime reality. The content changes, but the foundation of awareness remains unchanged. The third state is deep sleep without dreams. Here both the external world of waking and the internal world of dreams disappear. There are no thoughts, no images, no experiences. It seems that there is nothing at all. The sages called this state sushupti, deep sleep. It would seem that in this state there is nothing interesting to investigate. But the sages drew attention to an amazing fact. Even from the state where there is no experience, we return with certain knowledge. Upon waking, we say, "I slept well," or "I remember nothing." This means that even in deep sleep, there is someone present who experiences this. Moreover, it is deep sleep that gives us the deepest rest, not sleep with dreams where the mind continues to work, but precisely the state where there are no thoughts, no experiences. This indicates that our true nature does not need the content of consciousness for its existence. In pre-dawn hours, in that silence that precedes the awakening of the world, the sages made an astonishing discovery. They discovered a fourth state, a state that is neither waking nor dream sleep, nor deep sleep, but is present in all three as their foundation. They called this state Turiya, the fourth. But actually, this is not a state among other states. It is the very witness of all states. That pure consciousness which remains unchanged when all contents of experience change. Turiya is not something that needs to be achieved or developed. It is what already is, what always was, and always will be. It is the very foundation of all experience, the very condition of all experiencing. As the screen in a movie theater remains unchanged, whatever films are shown on it, so Turiya remains untouched by all states of consciousness. realization of turiya does not come as a new experience among other experiences. It comes as recognition of what was always present, but was not noticed, like a person searching for his glasses, forgetting that they are on his nose, suddenly remembers and laughs at his own forgetfulness. In this recognition, there is nothing mystical or supernatural. This is the most natural and simple experience, recognition of one's own true nature. As water is not surprised that it is wet, and fire that it is hot, so consciousness is not surprised that it is aware. Understanding the 4 states of consciousness radically changes the attitude to life. It becomes clear that all problems and suffering exist only in the first 3 states. In turiya, in pure witnessing consciousness, there are neither problems nor their solutions. There reigns perfect peace which nothing threatens. But this does not mean withdrawal from life or denial of the world. On the contrary, having established oneself in turiya, a person can fully participate in all 3 states of consciousness without losing connection with his true nature. As an actor can play different roles without forgetting who he truly is. Daytime activity, night dreams, deep peace, all these states become waves on the surface of the boundless ocean of consciousness. Waves come and go, but the ocean remains unchanged, and you are not a wave that fears disappearing. You are the ocean itself, playing at waves. The sun set below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. In this soft light, the ancient truths became especially clear. The path to oneself does not require journeys to distant countries. It requires only attentive investigation of what is closest, of one's own states of consciousness, of one's own awareness, of one's own nature. The river of consciousness flows through different landscapes of waking, dreams, and deep sleep. But the goal of this journey is not to reach the sea. The goal is to understand. The river and the sea have always been one. A drop of water from a mountain stream has the same nature as water in the ocean. In the same way, consciousness, manifesting in different states, always remains the same in its essence. In every breath, in every heartbeat, is present an invitation to this recognition. Not as something special that happens rarely, but as the most natural experience. the experience of who you are now and always. In the depth of the forest where sunlight barely penetrates through thick foliage, a special silence reigns. Here time flows differently. Here words acquire different weight. Here the meeting between teacher and student becomes a sacred act. The ancient tradition of transmitting wisdom was not simply teaching, but a living flow of knowledge that flowed from one heart to another, from one consciousness to another. The teacher, who was called Guru, was not a professor or lecturer in the modern sense. He was a living embodiment of that truth which he transmitted. His life, his behavior, even his silence were part of the teaching. The student came to him not simply for information, but for transformation, for a complete change in understanding of his nature. The relationship between teacher and student was built on the basis of complete trust and devotion. The student had to be ready to leave all his prejudices, all his ideas about himself and the world. As an empty vessel can receive water, so only a mind empty of its own opinions could receive teaching about the highest truth. In early morning hours, when dew still sparkled on the grass and the air was filled with the freshness of awakening nature, teacher and student often sat in silence. This was not wasted time. In this silence, the student's mind calmed down, internal dialogue subsided, and space was created for perceiving what cannot be expressed in words. One of the most famous stories about teacher-student relationships tells of a sage named Uddalaka and his son Shvetaketu. When Shvetaketu turned 12 years old, his father sent him to study with another teacher. For 12 years, the young man studied sacred texts, rituals, rules of behavior. He returned home proud of his knowledge, considering himself a great scholar. The father looked at his son and saw that he was full of pride and self-conceit. Then Uddalaka asked a simple question. "Dear son, did you study that knowledge, knowing which everything unknown becomes known?" Shvetaketu was puzzled. What knowledge was his father talking about? He had studied all the sacred texts, knew many rituals, could quote ancient hymns. What else could be studied? Then the father began teaching, which completely changed the son's understanding of the nature of reality. He did not read lectures and did not give complex philosophical explanations. Instead, he used simple examples from everyday life that pointed to the deepest truths. "Bring a banyan fruit," said the father. The son brought it. "Break it," said the father. "What do you see?" "Many small seeds, father." "Take one seed and break it." "What do you see now?" "Nothing, father. There is nothing inside the seed." "My dear son, from this nothing which you do not see grows the huge banyan tree. This subtle essence which you cannot see is the foundation of everything existing. It is the true. It is Atman. And you, O Shvetaketu, are that. So through simple analogies, patiently, lesson after lesson, the father opened to his son the greatest secret. What he sought in the external world was always present within him. What he tried to understand through studying texts was the very foundation of the one who studied these texts. In hot midday hours, the teacher could give the student a practical task. "Go and bring me one who is not born and does not die," he might say. The student would set off on a search, not understanding that what is sought is right here in the one who seeks. Only after long, fruitless searching would he return to the teacher with understanding. What is not born and does not die is his own true I. Sometimes the teacher transmitted knowledge through his own example. He could sit in deep meditation for hours, and the student, simply being nearby, absorbed this state of peace and serenity. He could perform the most ordinary actions, wash dishes, sweep the yard, prepare food, with such attentiveness and presence that the student understood every action can become spiritual practice. The transmission of knowledge often happened in the most unexpected moments. A student might ask a question about the nature of Brahman, and the teacher, instead of answering, would point to a singing bird. "Do you hear? This is the voice of Brahman." Or a student would ask where to find God, and the teacher would silently point to his own heart. Evening conversations were especially precious. In the soft light of the setting sun, when the daytime bustle subsided and the time for deep reflections came, the teacher revealed the most intimate truths. He spoke quietly, almost in a whisper, because these truths do not tolerate loud words and publicity. "The knowledge I transmit to you is not information. said the teacher. This is living understanding that will change your whole life. You will not be able to forget it, as facts or numbers are forgotten. It will become part of your being, your breath, your vision of the world. The teacher knew that each student is unique and approached each one differently. One needed intellectual explanations, another emotional inspiration, a third practical exercises. But the goal was one: to help the student recognize his true nature. Sometimes the teacher could not say anything important to the student for years, simply observing how he matures for perceiving truth. Because this knowledge cannot be given by force, it can only be awakened in one who is ready to receive it. As a seed sprouts only when suitable conditions are created for it. The moment of transmitting truth was special. This was not a gradual process of accumulating knowledge. It was an instantaneous recognition, a sudden insight that changed everything. The student suddenly understood what he had been seeking for many years had always been here. What he considered unattainable is his own nature. This moment of recognition did not depend on intellectual abilities or education. The simplest people could reach the deepest understanding, while great scholars could remain in ignorance. Because this knowledge addresses not the mind, but the very core of who we are. After this recognition, the relationship between teacher and student changed. Now they were not transmitter and receiver, but two manifestations of one and the same consciousness who had recognized each other. The teacher rejoiced, not because he had taught the student, but because truth had again recognized itself. In the night silence, when stars shone over the forest, and the world was immersed in deep peace, the teacher could say to the student the final words: "Now you yourself have become a teacher, not because you received some position or title, but because you recognized truth. And this truth will speak through you with everyone who is ready to hear it." So from generation to generation, from heart to heart, the wisdom of Vedanta was transmitted, not as dogma or philosophical system, but as living knowledge about who we truly are, knowledge that will never become outdated because it speaks of what is not subject to time. The tradition of Guru Shishya, teacher and student continues today, because in every person lives a student ready to recognize truth and a teacher ready to transmit it. And the meeting between them can happen at any moment, in any place where there is an open heart and sincere striving for truth. Imagine a person who searched for treasure all his life. He studied ancient maps, consulted with sages, traveled to distant lands, dug holes in the most incredible places. And suddenly, completely by chance, he discovers that the sought treasure had been lying in the foundation of his own house all this time. The joy of this discovery cannot be described in words. So it happens with spiritual awakening. A person can seek enlightenment for years, study sacred texts, visit holy places, practice complex meditation techniques, and suddenly he understands what he sought was never separated from him. It is his own true nature, hidden under layers of false ideas about himself. The ancient sages called such a person Jivan Mukta, liberated while living. Not one who left the world in search of salvation, but one who discovered in the world itself the source of all searching. Not one who denies life, but one who lives it fully, knowing at the same time his true nature. The Jivan Mukta does not become someone else. He simply stops being what he never was. As an actor, removing his mask after a performance does not acquire a new face, but simply shows his real one. So the awakened person does not receive a new essence, but recognizes the one that always was. In the morning, such a person wakes not as a separate personality concerned with his problems, but as a manifestation of unified consciousness playing the role of this personality. He washes, eats breakfast, goes to work, meets people, but all this happens spontaneously, without the sense of I am doing. As a river flows by itself, not asking permission from the stones in its path. This does not mean passivity or indifference. On the contrary, actions become more effective because they are not clouded by selfish motives. Love becomes boundless because there is no sense of I and other. Joy becomes causeless because it does not depend on external circumstances. In hot daytime hours, when other people suffer from the heat, the Jivan Mukta remains undisturbed. Not because he does not feel the heat, but because he knows heat is an experience in consciousness, not something that can harm consciousness itself. As a screen does not heat up from showing a film about fire, so the true I is not affected by any experiences. People often are surprised looking at such a person. He can cry, laugh, be angry, rejoice, but behind all these emotions, a deep peace is felt, unshakable silence. As in the center of a hurricane, there is always an area of complete calm. So in the center of any experiences of the Jivan Mukta, serenity is present. He does not preach and does not teach unless asked. His presence itself becomes teaching. Near him, people involuntarily calm down. Their mind becomes quieter. The heart opens because he radiates that state which is natural for everyone but forgotten by most. The Jivan Mukta does not consider himself special or chosen. He knows what he realized exists in every person. The difference is only that he stopped seeking it outside and discovered it inside. As a person who found his lost glasses does not consider himself great, so the awakened one does not feel superiority over others. In the evening, when the sun sets and the world prepares for rest, the Jivan Mukta can sit in the garden and observe the play of light and shadow on leaves. For him, this is not just a beautiful sight, but a living manifestation of the same consciousness which he is. Every leaf, every ray of light, every shadow is part of one infinite dance of being. Death does not frighten him because he knows. What he truly is never was born and never will die. The body can age and disappear, but the consciousness that was aware through this body is eternal. As an actor does not die when the performance ends, so the true I is not affected by the death of the body. But this does not make him indifferent to life. On the contrary, knowing about the transience of all forms, he values every moment, every meeting, every experience as a precious gift. He lives a full life, but without attachment to its results. Those around may not understand his behavior. Why does he not strive for wealth if money does not bring him suffering? Why does he not avoid difficulties if they do not cause him pain? Why is he equally calm in praise and blame in success and failure? The answer is simple. He sees in everything manifestations of one and the same consciousness. Wealth and poverty, praise and blame, success and failure are waves on the surface of the ocean of his own being. They come and go, but the ocean remains unchanged. The Jivanmukta does not deny the world and does not run from it. He participates in life fully, but as an actor participates in a performance, knowing that it is a play, but playing with all his heart. He can be a family man or a hermit, a king or a beggar. The external role does not matter. Only the inner understanding of one's true nature is important. At night, lying in bed, he does not plan tomorrow with anxiety and does not worry about the past with regret. He simply abides in the present moment, in pure awareness of what is, and he falls asleep with the same ease with which a river flows into the sea, knowing that in the morning he will again play the role of a separate wave. The state of Jivanmukta is not exclusive or unattainable. It is the natural state of every person, temporarily hidden by ignorance about one's own nature. And awakening to this state can happen at any moment, with any person ready to let go of all ideas about who he is and see who he truly is. In this vision, there is neither prit nor humility. There is only simple recognition of truth, which was always obvious, but somehow was not noticed. Like a person who searched for his glasses for a long time, suddenly discovers that they were on his nose all along, and laughs at his own blindness. Thousands of years have passed since the first words about the unity of Atman and Brahman were spoken in the shade of sacred trees of ancient India. The world has changed beyond recognition. Civilizations have risen and disappeared. New religions and philosophies have appeared. Science has discovered incredible secrets of the universe. But the echo of that ancient wisdom continues to sound, finding response in the hearts of people of the most diverse times and cultures. In the 8th century of our era, when India was experiencing a period of religious and philosophical disputes, a person appeared who was destined to become the greatest systematizer of the teaching of Vedanta. His name was Shankara, but history knows him as Shankaracharya, teacher Shankara. He lived only 32 years, but in this short time managed to create a philosophical system that remains unsurpassed in depth and clarity. Shankara was born into a Brahmin family in a small village in southern India. From early childhood, he showed extraordinary abilities for studying sacred texts. By 8 years old, he knew the main Vedas by heart, and by 12, he could conduct philosophical discussions with the most learned people of his time. But knowledge of texts did not bring him satisfaction. Like the ancient sages, he sought not information, but truth. At a young age, he left home and set out in search of a teacher who could show him the path to direct experience of reality. On the banks of the sacred Narmada River, he met the sage Govinda, who became his guru. Under the guidance of the teacher, young Shankara immersed himself in deep study of the Upanishads, not as texts for memorization, but as indications of living truth. And at the age of 16, what can only be called complete awakening happened to him. He realized from his own experience what the ancient texts spoke of. Atman and Brahman are one. Individual consciousness and cosmic reality are one and the same, only perceived from different points of view. The world of multiplicity and the unified foundation of being do not contradict each other, but are different levels of understanding one truth. This experience completely changed Shankara's life. He understood that his task was not simply to achieve personal liberation, but to systematize and explain the teaching of Vedanta so that it would become accessible to people of future generations. He began writing commentaries on the main Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, on the Brahma Sutras, texts that were considered the foundation of Vedantic philosophy. Shankara traveled throughout India, participating in philosophical disputes with representatives of other schools of thought. He was not an aggressive polemicist, but his logic was so clear and understanding so deep that even opponents recognized the strength of his arguments. The central idea of Shankara's philosophy received the name Advaita, which means non-duality. This concept asserts, at the absolute level of reality, there is no duality. There is no subject and object, knower and known, individual and God. All these distinctions exist only at the relative level. in the sphere of Maya, cosmic illusion. But Shankara did not deny the practical importance of these distinctions. He understood that a person cannot immediately move from perceiving multiplicity to experiencing unity. Therefore, he recognized two levels of truth: absolute and relative. At the relative level, the world is real, God exists, the soul strives for liberation. At the absolute level, there is only Brahman, playing at multiplicity. Shankara's teaching was not purely intellectual. He emphasized that understanding of non-duality must become a living experience, not just a philosophical concept. For this, he recommended combining study of sacred texts, reflection on their meaning, and deep meditation. Shankara founded 4 main monasteries in the 4 corners of India to preserve and transmit the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. These monasteries exist to this day, and their abbots bear the title Shankaracharya in honor of the great founder. The influence of Shankara went far beyond India and his time. In the 19th and 20th centuries, his ideas attracted the attention of Western thinkers. Philosophers like Schopenhauer found in Vedanta confirmation of their own intuitions about the nature of reality. Psychologists such as Carl Jung saw in the teaching of unified consciousness a key to understanding deep layers of the human psyche. Modern science, especially quantum physics, has discovered amazing parallels with the ancient insights of Vedanta. The uncertainty principle, the role of the observer in quantum measurements, non-locality. All this resonates with Vedantic ideas about the interconnectedness of everything existing and the fundamental role of consciousness. Researchers of consciousness find in Vedanta a rich source of ideas for understanding the nature of awareness. The concept of witnessing consciousness, which remains unchanged with all changes of experience. Anticipated. Modern theories about pure consciousness as the foundation of all mental processes. In our time, Shankara's teaching continues to influence spiritual seekers around the world. Teachers such as Ramana Maharshi in the 20th century transmitted the essence of Advaita through simple, direct indications of the true nature of I. Their influence spread far beyond traditional religious boundaries. Western teachers such as Jean Klein, Francis Lucille, Rupert Spira adapted the ancient truths of Vedanta for the modern mind, using language and examples close to people of industrial society. They show that realization of non-duality does not require accepting any religious system or cultural context. Interestingly, many modern achievements in neuroscience confirm ancient insights about the nature of consciousness. Studies of meditation show that mindfulness practices indeed change the structure of the brain, making a person calmer, more compassionate, and wiser. Psychology increasingly recognizes the importance not only of the content of consciousness, but of the very fact of awareness. Therapeutic approaches based on mindfulness help people discover in themselves that calm presence, which is not affected by any psychological problems. Even in everyday life, the ideas of Vedanta find practical application. Understanding that thoughts and emotions are temporary manifestations in consciousness, not the very essence of a person, helps cope with stress and conflicts. Awareness of the interconnectedness of all beings develops natural compassion and ecological consciousness. Vedanta does not age because it speaks not of what can change, but of what is the foundation of all changes, not of what needs to be achieved, but of what already is, not of whom one needs to become, but of whom we are now and always. In the noise of the modern world, amid the endless flow of information and entertainment, the ancient voice of Vedanta continues to whisper, "Thou art that." You do not need to go anywhere, achieve anything, become anything. You only need to stop, look within, and recognize what was never truly hidden. Today, in the era of skyscrapers and spaceships, social networks and artificial intelligence, the wisdom of ancient forests acquires new relevance. In a world where people feel increasingly alienated from each other and from nature, where technologies promise to connect everyone, but often lead to even greater loneliness, the message about the deep unity of all existing sounds like a saving balm for the weary soul. Scientists studying consciousness in modern laboratories come to conclusions that surprisingly resonate with the insights of ancient sages. Studies show that meditation indeed changes the structure of the brain, develops areas responsible for compassion, attention, and emotional stability. But the most interesting discovery is that there exists something that observes all these changes while remaining unchanged. In quiet research centers, where monitors show waves of brain activity and sensors record the slightest changes in the body of the meditating person, scientists discover the same thing that ancient rishis found in forest silence. There is a level of consciousness which is not harmed by any stress, which does not depend on external circumstances, which is the source of deep peace and clarity. Quantum physics, this most advanced area of modern science, speaks in a language that strangely resembles ancient texts of the Upanishads, the principle of complementarity, according to which one and the same reality can manifest now as a wave, now as a particle depending on the method of observation, resonates with the Vedantic idea that Brahman can be perceived both as unified and as multiple. The observer effect in quantum experiments, where observation itself influences the behavior of particles, is consonant with the ancient understanding of the fundamental role of consciousness in creating perceived reality. Non-locality, instantaneous connection between particles at any distance, recalls that unity which lies at the foundation of visible diversity of the world. 21st century psychology increasingly recognizes the importance of what can be called pure awareness, the ability to observe one's thoughts and emotions without fully identifying with them. Therapeutic approaches based on mindfulness help people discover in themselves that space of silence which is not affected by any psychological storms. Modern teachers of Advaita work not in forest ashrams, but in urban centers, not under banyans, but in modern halls, with air conditioning and projectors. But the essence of their message remains the same. You already are what you seek. They do not need to know Sanskrit or study ancient commentaries. They speak in simple words about what is available to everyone right here and now. In the era of globalization, Vedanta has crossed the boundaries of cultures and religions. Christian mystics find in it confirmation of their experience of union with God. Muslim Sufis recognize in descriptions of Brahman the same that they call Allah. Buddhists see similarity with the teaching about Buddha nature present in every being. Jewish Kabbalists find parallels with understanding of Ein Sof, infinite light. Even those who do not consider themselves part of any religious tradition find in Vedanta something deeply consonant with their experience. In moments when the sense of separateness temporarily disappears in contemplation of sunset, in the embrace of a loved one, in complete absorption in creative activity, in deep peace after meditation, people touch the same reality spoken of by the ancient sages. The Internet, this symbol of the modern era of connectedness, paradoxically becomes a means of spreading the teaching about the original connectedness of all existing. On the screens of computers and smartphones, millions of people read words written thousands of years ago and find in them answers to questions that seemed purely modern. Video recordings of lectures on non-duality gather hundreds of thousands of views. Online communities of people practicing self-investigation in the spirit of Vedanta unite seekers from all continents. The ancient tradition of satsang, communion with truth, acquires new forms in virtual space. But the essence remains unchanged. Wherever these words sound, in a Tibetan monastery or a New York office, in an Indian ashram or a Moscow apartment, they point to one and the same, to the presence that reads these lines, to the awareness that understands their meaning, to that I which remains unchanged in all changes of life. Modern neuroscience discovers that the sense of separate I is created by certain areas of the brain and can change under the influence of various practices or substances. This confirms the ancient understanding that ego is not a fixed reality, but rather a process, a construction of the mind. Studies show that people who regularly practice mindfulness meditation experience less stress, cope better with pain, show more compassion to others. Their brain literally restructures itself, becomes more flexible and resilient. But what is especially interesting, they report a growing sense of connection with all living things. The ecological movement finds in Vedanta philosophical justification for protecting nature. If everything is one at a deep level, then destruction of the environment is literally self-destruction. Understanding the interconnectedness of all forms of life naturally leads to careful treatment of the planet. In the field of education, programs appear based on principles of mindfulness that help children and adolescents develop not only intellectual abilities, but also emotional wisdom, the ability to observe their thoughts and feelings without full identification with them. The business community also discovers for itself the practical value of Vedantic ideas. Company leaders study principles of conscious leadership, which are based on understanding that true wisdom comes not from ego striving to control everything, but from a deeper source which acts spontaneously and effectively. But perhaps the most important influence of Vedanta in the modern world is how it helps people cope with the existential crisis that humanity is experiencing. In an era when traditional religions are losing influence and science, with all its achievements, cannot answer questions about the meaning of life, ancient wisdom offers a third path. This path does not require faith in the supernatural, but also does not reduce a person to a biological machine. It points to a dimension of being that can be directly experienced, but which transcends the ordinary boundaries of personality. It speaks of meaning that is not imposed from outside, but opens from within through understanding one's own nature. In hospitals, doctors use mindfulness techniques to help patients suffering from chronic pain or serious illnesses. These practices do not deny physical suffering, but help find that space in consciousness which remains untouched even by the strongest pain. In prisons, inmates study meditation and principles of self-investigation, finding freedom where it is least expected. Behind bars, they discover that external circumstances, however difficult they may be, cannot imprison their true essence. War veterans suffering from post-traumatic syndrome find healing through understanding that trauma touched their personality, their memories, their emotions, but could not damage that deep presence which they truly are. So ancient wisdom finds application in the most unexpected areas of modern life, not as dogma or religious teaching, but as practical understanding of the nature of consciousness, which can benefit any person, regardless of their worldview or life circumstances. The echo of this truth sounds in every heartbeat, in every breath, in every moment of awareness. It waits only to be heard amid the noise of everyday bustle. And when it is heard, everything changes, and nothing changes, because truth has been here always. But in the end, all paths lead home, all searching, all teachings, all practices point to one and the same, to simple recognition of who you are when you remove all masks, all roles, all ideas about yourself, to that presence which is closer than breath, more intimate than the most intimate thoughts, more obvious than the clearest experiences. Imagine a long journey through unfamiliar lands. You walk through mountains and valleys, cross rivers, traverse deserts. You meet different people, study different languages, learn different customs. Every day brings new discoveries, new impressions, new challenges. And then, after many years of wandering, you climb a hilltop and suddenly see familiar outlines in the distance. It is your home, your village, the place from which you once left. In this moment, you understand. The whole journey was a roundabout way home. Not because you got lost, but because only by passing through the whole world can you truly appreciate the beauty and value of the place where you were born. Only by seeing many other homes do you understand the uniqueness of your own. So it happens with spiritual searching. We study different teachings, practice different methods, seek truth in sacred texts and wise teachers. And all this is necessary. All this has meaning. But eventually, a moment comes when we understand what we sought was always here, in the very foundation of our being. This recognition comes not as a great revelation, accompanied by flashes of light and heavenly music. It comes quietly, simply, naturally, as dawn comes in the morning, not suddenly, but gradually, softly illuminating the world which was always here, but was hidden by darkness. In this recognition, there is nothing that can be shown to others, nothing to boast about. This is the most ordinary and most extraordinary experience at the same time. Ordinary because it is your own nature which never changed. Extraordinary because you suddenly see it as it is, without distortions of the mind. You understand that you were never that small, limited being which you considered yourself. You always were that infinite consciousness in which all experience appears and disappears, did not become it as a result of spiritual practice, but always were it. Simply did not notice this. This is like a person who wore colored glasses all his life and forgot about it. It seems to him that the whole world is painted in a certain color. And then, one day, the glasses accidentally fall, and he sees the world as it truly is. He did not change the world. The world did not change. Only perception changed. In this new vision, everything remains the same, and everything becomes completely different. You still live in the same body, in the same house, meet the same people. But now you know, all these forms are waves on the surface of the ocean of your own being. They come and go, but the ocean remains unchanged. Fear of death dissolves not because you believe in immortality, but because you directly see. What you truly are never was born. How can that die which was not born? The body appeared and will disappear as waves appear and did disappear. But the very water of the ocean is eternal. The sense of loneliness disappears, not because you find friends, but because in all beings you recognize yourself. In every glance, in every smile, in every tear, you see the same consciousness that looks from your eyes. How can that be lonely, which is everything? The search for happiness ceases not because you received everything you wanted, but because you understood. Happiness is your nature, not a state that comes and goes, but the very foundation of all states. As water does not become wet, it is wet by its nature. So you do not become happy. You are happiness itself. All searching for God ends with understanding. God was never separated from you. Not because you found him somewhere, but because you stopped seeking him where he is not. You discovered him in the very act of searching, in the very desire to find, in the very feeling of love that moves all seeking. This understanding does not make you special or enlightened in the sense it is usually imagined. You do not receive superpowers. Do not begin to glow in the dark. Do not acquire power over others. You simply become natural, real, authentic, like a river that flowed for a long time through artificial channels and finally found its natural course. It did not become another river. It became itself. So you do not become someone else. You become who you always were under all layers of false ideas about yourself. In this simplicity, there is a place for pride. How can you be proud that you saw your own eyes in a mirror? How can you boast that you recognized your own face? This is the most natural experience in the world, recognition of what was never alien. And at the same time, in this simplicity, there is no place for false humility. How can you belittle what is the foundation of all existing? How can you consider small what contains all worlds within itself? This is the greatest of possible revelations, and at the same time, the most ordinary thing. Life continues. In the morning, you wake up, eat breakfast, go to work. In the evening, you return home, have dinner, communicate with loved ones. At night, you go to bed. Externally, nothing has changed, but inside, everything has become completely different. Every action now is performed by itself, without the sense of I am doing. As a river flows naturally without asking permission, so life lives itself. You are present in everything that happens, but not as the doer, but as the very space in which everything happens. In the silence of this presence, words sound which have echoed through thousands of years. Tat tvam asi. Thou art that. Not as a philosophical statement requiring proof, but as the most obvious experience. More obvious than sunrise, more certain than one's own breath. And in this silence, you understand. The journey ended where it began, in your own heart, in the depth of your own being, in the center of that awareness which never left you for a moment. You came home not after long wanderings, but through recognition that you never left. Breath enters and exits. Thoughts come and go. Feelings rise and fall. But you remain unchanged, the witness of all changes, the foundation of all experiences, the source of all searching. In this recognition, there is no end, because there is no beginning. There is only eternal now, in which one truth has always sounded and always will sound. You are what you are, and what you are is that, all that, unified that, eternal that, which plays at multitude of forms, but remains unchangeably itself. Silence, peace, home. You are that.